Hello and welcome to actually our very first episode of Nicstalgia. I am so excited to have our guest here with us today. Jenna and I are going to talk about all of our pop culture obsessions, and I absolutely can't wait. So, welcome, Jenna.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. It's like I have to think of a place to start because I really do feel like we have so much in common. You are a content creator primarily on TikTok and you share nostalgic moments. You have so many, I'm going to call them artifacts, but basically things of the past that you're able to, whether it's a Juicy Couture bag or an Abercrombie polo, Hollister jeans that you're able to source for your content. And it just brings people so much joy to be back in this moment.
Yeah, it's been really fun to unearth a lot of the artifacts because most of them are actually original. I'm an only child and my mom lives alone, so she just never cleaned out my bedroom. And it's so funny to see people's reactions to these things because, it's not my memory and therefore interpretation of the time. It's really the time. So it's not always the things that get a lot of attention in kind of the nostalgia world. So sometimes there are things that people had really forgotten about, but we really loved, and then I'll find it and put it on TikTok, and everyone goes wild because it just brings you back to such a specific moment, especially if you've totally forgotten about it.
Yeah, definitely. I love talking about, yes, nostalgia, the longing for the past, and yes, nowstalgia, experiencing that enthusiasm, even if you didn't have the firsthand experience. And Nicstalgia is really where we talk about both and how they come together. And I actually read an article recently saying how the millennial era meme is dead, where it'll be a very broad cultural reference. So, Mean Girls, The Devil Wears Prada, like things that every millennial is basically seen. And that's not cool anymore because so many people understand it. Whereas that was why millennials thought it was cool. Whereas maybe a younger crowd, Gen Z, will be like, no, it's cool because not everybody knows about it. And I'll be looking on Instagram and see an edit, and then someone will comment, movie name, and it's like, how do you not know that that is from Mean Girls? But that's the thing, the fact that someone maybe didn't experience it for themselves the first time, and especially seeing content from your individual perspective, because you're using originals, it might be something that not everybody recognizes, but then when they see you wearing it or you talking about it, they're like, that's really cool. That's something that's what Y2K means to me, because
Right.
I see that it's really been a part of someone else's life. So I want to hear about what it was like growing up in the Midwest for you too, because I know that that is part of your content. And I grew up New York Metro adjacent in Connecticut. And so I think that that's a little bit where the stories about our American culture, especially in the early 2000s, like might have some differences. So, how do you feel like that informs your content? And also, what's kind of been like the reaction from people who also might be from the Midwest and they not only see content that reminds them of their youth, but like it gets super specific?
Yeah, totally. I think that that's been a big appeal of my content is that it is really specific. And going back to what you mentioned about people liking to kind of pick up on little things that not everybody recognizes, I throw in a lot of references to things that if you're not from that area, you have no idea what it means. And I also went to school in Texas, so I'll throw in little things about that experience, and people latch onto that because it speaks directly to them and an experience that they had. So being from the Midwest, I grew up in a very small town, and I feel like when I talk to people and I say small town, they don't know what that means unless they're from one like this. So when I say small town, I mean there was one stoplight in the county. There was one cop on duty at all times, and we pretty much knew where that cop was. There was no movie theater, there was no Walmart, there was no mall. I mean, there was nothing. Everybody knew everybody. I mean, it's like what you see in the movies when they show you like a really small town in the Midwest. I actually loved that 70s show growing up because their whole, like, just hanging out in the basement, even the theme song, it's about doing nothing. That was my experience. So making videos about how we would like get completely dressed up in these outfits that we thought were so cool, but really they were from Abercrombie and everybody was wearing the exact same thing. But I thought that was really cool because in my small town, you know, that was special. Everybody else was wearing like Carhartts before that was cool. And getting all dolled up to just go sit around in a garage on like a folding chair, you know, I think it really speaks to people because they can recognize that in themselves, but they can also look back and think like, wow, we really thought that was so important. We thought that like Hollister miniskirt was so important. And it was just because of the fact that we kind of lived in this bubble and there was not really anything else to care about. And I think that was part of the reason why I became so obsessed with fashion. And when I make these videos showing different trends, I really did jump on every trend. And a big part of that was because I did grow up in this place where there wasn't really anything else to latch onto. So that was my thing. That was kind of what I used to form my identity in a lot of ways.
Definitely. And I want to hear more about this identity formation and if you felt any sense of like a disconnect because you were from somewhere that sounds more rural or a small town where like even I had to drive 45 minutes to go to Adelia's, and how that kind of, you know, formed your identity in how you discovered trends and how you decided what resonated with you.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking back because I'm often curious how I discovered trends because this was before the internet. Really, I mean, the internet existed, but all we were really doing on it was going into chat rooms and going on AOL Instant Messenger. So I would assume that I got most of my trend ideas from magazines and obviously celebrities. I mean, I watched everything on TV. I was obsessed with all the celebrities of the time. I followed everything that like Britney Spears and Paris and Nicole were doing. So that's where I got a lot of my inspiration. And I was always an early adopter of trends. I was the girl who would show up to school wearing something that now would get filmed in secret and put on social media because they would be making fun of it. And everybody in my school, for the most part, was wearing like very low-key outfits. A lot of people in my town were farmers. They would come to school in their farm clothes. Or, you know, they'd be wearing like a high school football t-shirt. And I would come to school in these like insane outfits. I had these jeans that were massive flares with graffiti paint all over them and like rhinestones with this top that had like a lace up thing down the side that I got from Wet Seal, and I wore that to school at like 15 years old, like walked in thinking I owned the place. But that was, again, this identity that I was crafting for myself. And I'm sure that people made fun of it behind my back, but I don't think that I was as aware of that because the internet didn't exist. We didn't have social media, you know. If somebody wanted to make fun of my outfit to my face, fine, but most people didn't, so I just didn't even hear it, and I didn't care.
Yeah, I felt like that too, where like I totally did wear Abercrombie and Hollister like all the other kids, but like I was a diehard Delia's girl, and my style's always been very eclectic, and when I was especially in high school, I would wear these kitschy outfits where it was like extremely matchy where it's like
Me too.
and you'd always be wearing multiple shirts too, whether it was a cami, a tank top, a polo, or some combination of the three, at least wearing two of them, if not more, at all times, where it'd be like, okay, I'd have one hot pink tank top with one lime green tank top, and then I had two piercings in my ears. So one would be like those little earrings that kind of look like gumballs. One would be lime green and one would be hot pink. And then I would have two barrettes in my hair. One would be lime green, one would be hot pink. And then I would be wearing my neon pink Converse with green shoelaces. Like it was like every single little detail was so quirky and a little bit out there sometimes. And I actually got sent to the principal's office once in high school, and I have a picture of the outfit that I was wearing. It's kind of ridiculous that this was a concern at the time, but this was before leggings were accepted as pants. And so I was wearing a denim miniskirt from Delia's with literally polka dot legging, like full length. Well, they didn't really do full length, but kind of like ankle length polka dot leggings with high top chucks. And they're like, no, that skirt is way too short. I'm like, but you don't see my legs. at all. And this was like a big issue. So I'm like, wow, for better or for worse, I think that I was the trailblazer at my high school in Connecticut to be the first one to wear leggings as pants, which then, as you know, and as we know, the denim miniskirt with the polo and the leggings, but also with the flip flop. Like,
Always. That was the look.
well, flip flop in the summer and UGG or UGG similar boot,
I did the
Juicy
skater
Couture
shoes.
boot. Ooh,
Yeah, not good. Not good.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
A friend of mine had the checkerboard Vans in high school,
yeah.
and it's like I've never had those exact ones myself, but the fact that it is how many ever years ago, 15 plus years later, and I'm still thinking about getting them, like figuratively, that has been in my shopping cart of my life for the last 15 years.
I actually have them in two colors. I have pink ones as well as the black. I love them.
I should get them.
Yeah, you should. But it just goes to show that these things always come back around, and some things stay very consistent. Like those Vans are exactly the same ones that we were wearing, but the way that we would style them, of course, is very different. And it's just so fascinating to see these things now coming back around because we lived through them the first time, and now we're seeing them reinterpreted, and it's wild. It makes me feel old, but I also think that it's really cool and fun to see.
I know that we've talked about our nostalgia, but I want to talk about our, as millennials, nowstalgia too, because and I'm assuming because you're wearing the Doors t-shirt that you, and because you love that 70s show like I did, you were also in love with the 1970s. And now it's weird being old enough to see a trend cycle repeat for a second time because the vantage point that we have of the 1970s, but from the 1990s is different than, for example, my mom, who was around in the 1970s, because it's the Consumer Aesthetics Research Institute. They've actually inspired a lot of trend content on TikTok, but they're a group that puts together all of these micro trends and is able to define extremely specific aesthetics. One of them is called Groovival. That's my personal favorite. And it describes having that vantage point from the 1990s, looking back to the 1970s. So like when I was a kid, I had tie-dye t-shirts and flare jeans, and I literally had a hippie themed birthday party when I was in 1999. But due to the zeitgeist at the time, because it was the 1990s, not the 70s, it didn't have the same kind of like political overtones that the 60s and 70s hippie movements did, but that style, the psychedelic kind of look, Lisa Frank, even in high school we had a fashion show and everyone was wearing, like, again, their polos, their Abercrombie, and I came in with a Delia's t-shirt with the Andy Warhol banana print all over it, and I walked to Groove is in the Heart by D-Light. Actually, I'm going to try to get up to show you, but that t-shirt from the fashion show, my mom made into a pillow that I keep on my bed. So if people are watching, on YouTube or Spotify, you can see this pillow.
Wait, that's so cute. I love that.
Thanks. So it's like one of my favorite memories I now get to look at every single day. And it's literally a Delia's t-shirt. But yeah, so I want to know about what your relationship to the 70s is.
Yes. I mean, I was obsessed with it. And it's so funny because I was actually just at the mall the other day and I went into H&M, and if you've been there lately, I mean, it is full 90s. And I was looking around at all this stuff and I said to my husband, how did we not realize that we were full on dressing like we were going to Studio 54 in the 90s? I mean, there was like this shiny black leather jacket with like fur on the sleeves, and it's just so clearly the 70s inspired. But, you know, maybe it was our age. We were just really wrapped up in the trend, and I loved it. I had all of the things, you know, the smiley faces and the flowers and peace signs and all of it, all from Claire's, of course. But I loved it. And even continuing into the 2000s, a lot of the trends that I really loved, like the fur-lined jackets, a lot of the bombers, obviously the flares. I always had the chunky shoes. That was our total aesthetic. I mean, that carried through for a really long time. And I remember so specifically one time I got this sweater, and I still have it. It will make an appearance in a video at some point. It's a long duster sweater from Express. It's purple, and it has fur along the openings and along the sleeves and along the bottom. And I convinced my mom to buy it for me. Of course, it was on clearance because no one else was buying that. And she was horrified, and she was like, I wish I still had all of my clothes because you would wear them all now. And I was like, ugh, you don't know what you're talking about. So I really, truly didn't even realize or acknowledge that our trends were on this cyclical pattern where we were wearing the same things that they had been wearing in the 70s, but at the same time, things like that 70s show and other pop culture that referenced that time really appealed to me. I also loved the movie Dazed and Confused. I was obsessed with it in high school. That spoke a lot to my experience too, with the fact that they didn't really do anything except for drive around. So there was an awareness to that, but I think to me, being a teenager or even younger than that and just being so wrapped up in my own world and thinking that I was being so original and it was, fashion was like my identity. I didn't want to admit that we were ripping off previous trends from other decades, and especially not things that my mom would have worn because she wasn't cool, So
yeah,
we definitely have a greater perspective of it now, seeing it come back again. And same thing with a lot of the 60s trends that we saw in the 90s and Y2K that everybody's wearing now. It's like, now when I look at it, it looks so 60s versus looking so 90s, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what do you think is the difference now with Nowstalgia? Because when it was our generation, we didn't have the internet. Like, we couldn't just Google or look up on Wikipedia a piece of pop culture or piece of media or a fashion trend. Whereas now it almost seems like people are still have that lack of awareness around their predecessors, but yet they have more access or more democratized access at the very least to any information that they would need to find. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I kind of think that a big part of it is there's just so much access now that people can really pick and choose what they want to see. So, if somebody's into Y2K fashion, they can choose to follow all of these Gen Z Y2K fashion accounts, or even some of the nostalgia people that are putting out that kind of content that is very exaggerated or kind of focuses in on certain things that are trendy now because that resonates. So that's what they're seeing, because we kind of create the media experience that we want to engage with. The same thing goes for music or Netflix or anything else. You don't have to sift through all of this stuff to find something that you like. You can just go directly to the thing that you already know or believe that you will like. So you're not exposed to different interpretations of, let's say, Y2K fashion if you're just zeroing in on a Gen Z interpretation of Y2K fashion.
Definitely. Do you think that people's parents have as much of an influence on them now? Because I know that, or I'm assuming that for teenagers, like, the internet is what influences them the most, not necessarily the behaviors or style of their parents. Whereas for us, that might have been a bigger influence.
Yeah. I think that not just parents, but in real life, people, for better or for worse, kind of have less of an influence now because you can choose. Again, you can choose what you want to engage with and kind of what experience you want to have. Like, when I was younger, my parents didn't necessarily have a huge influence on my likes or my style, but I remember babysitters being a huge thing. Like, I was obsessed with what my babysitters were doing because that was the only example of like a cooler older person that I could come in contact with, besides a celebrity, but that was far removed and not, realistic. So now kids don't have to look to necessarily people they know in real life. They can find those influences online, and I think, again, they can just kind of choose, who they want to follow.
Yeah,
versus
definitely.
just going to the people that they know in their life.
I remember I listened to Semi Charm Life for the first time with my babysitter, and I was like, how old? I don't know, 6 years old or something when that song came
Yeah.
out. And so we know that this is just add that to the very long list of songs that we would sing that were not age appropriate. But I just remember thinking, like, this is so cool.
Yeah. I actually remember when I got my driver's license. I don't know if you remember, but they had these like jelly air fresheners that were in the shape of a foot and they were glittery. And
Yeah,
you remember
I
those?
haven't ever thought about them until this moment. Memory
This is a
unlocked.
standout memory of mine. My babysitter had one of those in her car when I was a kid. And when I got my driver's license, I went and bought one because that to me was cool. Because that was my only frame of reference for like a cool 16-year-old who had just gotten a car was my babysitter from how many years prior. So I copied what she had done. And, this was 2003 when I got my driver's license. I'm talking about what she was doing in like 1996. Like that wasn't cool anymore, but in my mind that was cool. Versus the teen now, they could just go online and find some TikToker that they see as like the cool older person to emulate instead of having to look for like some example in real life.
Yeah, I love to tell the story of one of the very few times my mom was ever wrong. And so when I was maybe about 7 or 8 years old, we were in Claire's and they used to have driving accessories there as well. But when you're a kid, you don't have a car, you don't have a license, and there was no way that my mom would ever let me put a bumper sticker or something of my choosing on her car. And there was a Spice Girls bumper sticker and it was sparkly. And I'm like, Mom, I have to get this. And she's like, You're 8 years old. Like, what do you need a bumper sticker for? I'm like, just if you get it for me, I promise I will use it as soon as I get a car, as soon as I get my license. Like, I promise I'll use it. I'll save it until then. And she goes, You're not even going to like the Spice Girls by the time you get your license. I rest my case because I'm still convinced that I am a Spice Girl 25 years later.
I would put that on my car now. I wish I
I
had
would
that.
put that on my car now. My first, you know what I remember too? At Claire's, the little keychains that they had. So I had one with NSYNC on it
Yes.
and the rabbit's foot. I had a
Oh,
green
yes.
rabbit's foot.
I had so many. We used to buy them. They would have these like weird little gift shops at all of these, places that we would go on vacation, and I would always buy a rabbit's foot. That is such a bizarre thing to have hanging off your backpack as a child.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, again, I don't know why I was 7 years old and I had a wallet because I
Right.
had nothing to put in the wallet. Maybe like a few quarters or something that I found in my couch, but it's just really funny how these experiences and like these extremely specific memories that we have, they define our experience and then we don't even realize how that goes on to inspire and influence others. And even one of my favorite gifts is this actually. I literally have everything here. People watching, like this is a good one. I have the Spotify keychain with the playlist on it. And look, of course, my AirPods case
Oh,
because
yes. I
it's
love
yin and
that.
yang, all about groovival. My cell phone is like checkers and a giant glittery smiley face because why wouldn't it be? But my sister made me this playlist, or this keychain of a playlist. She gave it to me for Christmas, and it has, quote, our songs on it. And a lot of them are from that mid 2000s period, because that's when I got my driver's license.
Right.
And I would drive my sister. She's 3 years younger than I am. So I would drive her around, and those were the songs that we would listen to in the car. And I had a giant, I'm sure you had one of these CD binders.
Oh, of course.
Like that was the thing to do.
Yeah, and then you'd have to trust the person that was riding with you to choose the right CD because you obviously couldn't do that while you were driving. Music is such an interesting piece of nostalgia too. Like that's been my favorite part to be honest, of creating these videos is choosing the music, because a lot of the times when I create, especially the outfit ones, they're based off a really specific real life event. It's either a photograph that I find of me wearing it, or it's an outfit that I remember wearing like at a specific time or to a specific place. And there's a song that just unlocks that memory for me. And I feel like a lot of people have resonated with that too. And again, a lot from that same mid-2000s period, because that's also when I got my license. And, you know, when you can drive, you're all of a sudden independent and you're an adult. So a lot of good memories come from that time. But the music really pulls it all together, because you can have the outfit, but when you put the song together, it makes it just that much more specific. And I think this idea of very specific memories is something that for our generation is making this kind of nostalgia moment really powerful, because that is what makes it about us and not about the younger kids that are becoming interested in it because they like the aesthetic look of it. You know, that's what sets it apart, is putting yourself into it versus just admiring it from afar.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting to really have enjoyed your own adventure. I think that in the moment, it's like we do look to magazines, and maybe nowadays people do look more to influencers or to others. And whether you are thinking about something nostalgic, or now as we're just living our lives as 30 somethings, we realize that everything truly is up to our interpretation, and our experience of what we want life to be can be so fun, because it is subjective. Ultimately, we all only have our own first person experience. And as we continue to make these memories, like, I'm not going to have somebody being like, oh, you're still wearing that. No, if I want to use my self-expression, that's my number one value. If I want to use music or fashion to express myself the way that I always have, then I think that's wonderful. And if people find a way to have those pieces of culture continue to resonate with them, whether it's something from the days of now or yesterday, like, that's our choice. Like, we get to make that choice for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's one of the coolest and most powerful things about social media, is that you can express yourself. Like, you don't have to wait for somebody to come along and decide that you have a talent or you have a message that's worthy of being put out there into the world. You can just literally create a TikTok or an Instagram or a YouTube or whatever, a podcast, and put it out there and connect with people that are also interested in it, you know, in their own way. So I love that people are becoming interested in the things that we loved when we were younger. You know, I feel like a lot of people expect me to be very like, ugh, Gen Z, like they don't know. But I love it. Like, I love it when little teenagers are commenting and being like, oh my God, I love this fashion. Like, this is so cool. I wish I lived back then. You know, because great, if you can find some enjoyment in it, me too. Like, we can connect on that piece. I think
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because yeah, the purpose really is to bring people together and make them feel a part of something. And so if a younger generation wants to be a part of something, like, I'm not going to pull a you can't sit with us, because why not have people feel included? I think that when we look back at nostalgic things through a contemporary lens, exclusion is something that has defined nostalgic things for multiple generations, including ours, in that there were certain people who either weren't represented or who weren't welcome. And so now it's like, if we're having conversations, when you know better, you do better. And
Yeah.
so we can include people. And of course, although we do have our perspective from the 90s, from the 2000s, we aren't there anymore. And so now we have established a place and an understanding of the past, but from the present too. Actually, I think that's actually tricky, because that's how I feel, but I actually feel like, now that I'm saying it out loud, that might not be how many or most people feel. Like, most people look back in the past and they're like, oh, I wish I could go back there. Oh, I wish I could redo this, or that time was so much better, romanticizing it, glamorizing it, etc. but it's like, well, you can't. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? Like the being able to accept being in the now without like having that you have like that excitement about the past, but that doesn't mean you want to relive it.
100%. People say this all the time. You know, it's probably the top comment on all of my videos is like, fashion was better, those times were better, take me back, let's go back. And a lot of it is just like kind of half joking, like, oh, I wish that I could go back to a time when I felt that way, when I felt carefree, when I felt like the most important thing in the world was my outfit. And that I understand. But I do think that there's a lot of romanticizing of the past. And I think it's equal from people who did and people who didn't experience it. You know, from the younger generation, there's a lot of just romanticizing things that they've cherry picked from that time. You know, yes, there was great fashion that I would love to see come back around. But there's also really awful fashion trends and things like you touched on that just did not work for a lot of body types that we should not bring back. And the experience is easy to romanticize if you weren't there and you're just like watching The Simple Life and thinking like, oh my God, Paris and Nicole looked so amazing in those outfits. And then, of course, people who did live it are looking back on it for the same reason that I mentioned, that they're looking for that feeling, not necessarily that time. So I agree with what you're saying. Like, I love to look back and appreciate. And I'm really happy that a lot of these trends are coming back because there's some of them that I legitimately think were cute and I will definitely wear them again. Like, I don't care how old I am. I'm still on board with embracing trends if it speaks to you. But I don't have any desire to spend my Friday nights driving around and drinking cheap alcohol in a barn. Like, we've moved past that. You know, we can look back on it and think about how fun it was then. But I think part of growing up and just kind of changing as a person is being able to kind of reconcile that you can appreciate things without wanting them, you know, or you can look back fondly, but be fully present and happy and content and satisfied with where you are now.
Yeah.
So I think that that's kind of a cool thing about nostalgia is you can look back and you can cringe and appreciate it at the same time. And it makes you maybe more appreciative of where we are now.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I want to thank you so much for being with me today. I had so much fun. We could literally go on and on. All of Jenna's info is in the show notes if you want to connect. And we'll see you next time. Thank
Thank you.
you.